In 2006, the world became obsessed with a television show about a serial killer who only hunted other killers. It was called Dexter. We thought it was a comforting primetime fiction. We were wrong. The monster is real, and his actual body count shatters the Hollywood illusion. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today, we are opening a completely new branch of study. Hollywood scripts are curated fiction. They give their monsters clean laboratories, moral mentors, and predictable safety nets. But strip away the cinematic lighting and you are left with a chaotic, high entropy landscape where the law does not sleep. It simply fails to exist. This is the unyielding reality of Pedro Rodrigues Filho, known globally to the streets of Brazil as Pedrinho Matador, the apex predator of predators, the man from whom the Dexter mythos was inspired. But how does a broken biological brain create a flawless executioner? How do you murder nearly 50 people while locked inside a concrete, maximum security cage? And the most terrifying question of all, why did the government legally release a biological weapon with 70 confirmed kills back onto the streets? This is not a standard true crime biography. To understand this anomaly, we didn't just watch the television adaptation. We analyzed the neurological degradation of his prefrontal cortex, audited the structural loopholes of the 1940 Brazilian Penal Code, and dissected the exact mechanics of a legal singularity. This is the structural analysis of an unauthorized predatory organism. Serial killers are not generated in a vacuum. So, what exactly breaks inside a human skull to create an individual who feels absolutely zero hesitation when pulling the trigger? The trajectory of Pedro Rodrigues Filho does not originate from a moral choice. It begins with a profound mechanical failure of the human biological apparatus. In 1954, Filho entered the world with a physically compromised skull. This malformation was the direct consequence of a severe, blunt force assault inflicted upon his mother by his father during gestation. In clinical neurology, this is classified as a prenatal traumatic brain injury. We need to understand exactly what that means. The human brain relies entirely on the prefrontal cortex to function as the biological governor of behavior. It modulates impulse control, calibrates emotional empathy, and enforces social compliance. Think of the prefrontal cortex as the heavy brake pedal inside a high-speed sports car. It is the only mechanism stopping the vehicle from crashing. When the cortex suffers structural degradation in the womb, you are essentially severing the brake lines before the engine is even turned on. Filho was born with no biological brakes. By the time he was 14, the internal neural pressure reached a critical state. His father was fired from a school security job, falsely accused of theft by the local government. Filho bypassed all institutional legal channels. He tracked the deputy mayor of the town hall and executed him with a shotgun. Shortly after, he found the actual culprit and liquidated him as well. He was 14 years old. He felt no remorse. He felt no hesitation. His internal operational code was strictly binary. Administrative error identified, administrative error eliminated with lead. In his mind, the ledger was permanently balanced. But what happens when you take an organism with absolutely no biological brakes and you assassinate the only stabilizing variable in his life? Following his initial executions, Filho fled to the high-density metropolis of Sao Paulo. He did not hide. He initiated a localized offensive insurgency against the regional narcotics cartels. He raided distribution dens and executed mid-level dealers. he was functioning as an unauthorized tactical enforcer. During this relentless campaign, Philo found a temporary stabilizing variable, a woman named Maria Olympia. For a brief window, his destructive algorithm achieved a non-lethal state. But stability in a criminal ecosystem is a fragile illusion. A rival cartel ambushed and murdered the pregnant Olympia to sever Philo's supply lines. The loss of this variable instantly triggered a mass liquidation directive within Philo's cognitive framework. He did not engage in a standard gang war. He shifted into systematic deconstruction. He tracked, intercepted, tortured, and terminated every single individual associated with that cartel's hierarchy. He obliterated them, but the most critical baseline shift occurred within his own biology. His father, the man who caused his brain damage, the man who started it all, murdered Philo's mother with a machete. By the time law enforcement captured Philo in 1973, his father was already locked inside the exact same prison complex. The state system believed they had safely contained the hazard. They drastically miscalculated the chemistry. Philo bypassed cell security. He entered his father's block. He inflicted 22 stab wounds, and then he executed a cardiac excision, ripping open the thoracic cavity, extracting his father's heart, and biting into it. From a behavioral standpoint, this was the ultimate taboo. It functioned as an absolute, permanent social signal to the entire criminal underworld. Pedro Rodrigues Filho was not an inmate. He was an apex organism that had literally consumed the heart of his own creator. You would expect a maximum security prison to instantly neutralize a threat this volatile. So how does a single, unarmed man execute nearly 50 subjects while trapped inside a locked, concrete environment? Philo was historically credited with the deaths of at least 47 fellow inmates inside those walls. To understand this important metric, we must evaluate the predator-on-predator ratio of the 1970s Brazilian penal architecture. The system was a severely broken, high-entropy ecosystem. It was characterized by extreme overcrowding, structural neglect, and a total blackout of electronic surveillance. But Philo did not exploit the weak. His target matrix was highly selective. He hunted rapists, child molesters, extortionists, and inmates who violated the internal code of the yard. For over 3 decades, Philo was terminating a fellow inmate approximately every 264 days. Placing Philo in a maximum security prison was not locking him in a cage. It was identical to dropping a great white shark into a sealed, overcrowded fish tank and refusing to pull it out. The institutional guards routinely weaponized his presence to maintain order. They simply looked the other way, allowing him to audit the inmate population. Meanwhile, the general population was utterly terrified to challenge his domain. The state completely surrendered control of its internal cell blocks. Inside those walls, Philo had effectively transitioned into the shadow governor of the prison. This brings us to a glaring, terrifying structural contradiction. Why was a human asset with 70 confirmed state record kills ever permitted to walk out of a prison gate and re-enter society? The answer is found in a massive structural vulnerability within the Brazilian legal architecture. Per the Brazilian Penal Code of 1940, which governed the judicial system during his sentencing, the maximum continuous period of incarceration any individual could legally serve was strictly capped at 30 years. It did not matter what the judge said in the courtroom. Judicial magistrates sequentially sentenced Philo to an aggregate total exceeding 400 years of prison time. But the literal text of the statute functioned as an unyielding, mandatory hard reset. 30 years was the absolute mathematical ceiling. This architectural limitation generated a severe moral hazard. Think of it like a maxed out credit card with absolutely zero penalty fees. For the final 2 decades of his confinement, the marginal cost of murdering for Filho dropped to absolute zero. If he executed a disruptive inmate or liquidated a rival inside the yard, the judicial system possessed no further leverage. They could not add more time to his sentence. He had already hit the statutory ceiling. This environment represents a legal singularity, a specific structural failure point where the law loses its entire capacity for deterrence. Inside those concrete walls, Filho was a sovereign entity operating with a functional, state-sanctioned license to execute. When the state finally processed his release, they unleashed a biological weapon from an era of unchecked structural violence directly into a modern, highly digitized society. But Filho executed a highly unexpected tactical pivot. He entered the modern attention economy. He transformed himself into a high-reach YouTube influencer. He pioneered monetized infamy. He deployed a carefully constructed narrative of rehabilitation, warning the youth that entering the narcotics trade guarantees an immediate path to cemetery. He successfully recycled his legacy of physical trauma into algorithmic capital, becoming a real-world folk hero to hundreds of thousands of subscribers. But within the brutal math of street-level violence, the loop is never a closed circle. It is an incoming spiral. In March 2023, standing on the exact streets where he waged his initial war decades prior, a black vehicle intercepted his position. Multiple assailants executed him with high-velocity gunfire, followed by a surgical throat slashing. It was a professional, corporate-style clearing of an outstanding historical ledger. The apex predator of the old world was completely obliterated by the automated, systemic violence of the new era. Filho lived the exact nightmare that Hollywood writers could only safely simulate on a television screen. But outside the boundaries of fiction, there is no comforting narrative. There is only the ledger, and the ledger always balances. Now, look at the structural mechanics of this case. Do you believe that a judicial architecture utilizing a fixed maximum penalty cap effectively issues a state-sanctioned license for killers to operate with zero cost, or is a rigid sentencing ceiling a mandatory safeguard required to prevent absolute state-led tyranny? Leave your detailed perspective in the comment section below. We will meet in our next video to dissect the next anomaly. Until then, stay analytical and stay curious.